on us Twitter. Thanks for making us part of your day. Airport staffing problems are becoming more and more worrisome ahead of the busy holiday travel season. Staffing shortages saw thousands of flights delayed across the U.S. over the weekend as the nation's air traffic control continued to work with no pay during the government shutdown. The FAA reports staffing issues at airports in Chicago, Las Vegas, Philadelphia, Nashville, and at our air traffic control centers in Atlanta, Boston, Dallas, and Houston areas. So, what do travelers need to know, such as myself, as they get ready to make the holiday travel plans? He's our guest expert, Prag Amin. He's a business expert, an attorney who deals in business and labor issues, large and small. Prag earned his law degree from the University of Southern California School of Law and has a Bachelor of Science degree in finance from the University of Maryland. He has represented public figures, small business owners, and individuals in a variety of business matters. Prag, how are you? Welcome to the program. Thanks for making us part of your day today.
Hi, Kevin. Pleasure. Thank you.
Well, the government shutdown is over, right? Now all is well. What say you?
Well, I mean, look, the government is kind of back to work in its own government kind of way, but of course, there's some residual effects from this shutdown that I think that we're all going to feel. In terms of the overall amount of flights, they are back to capacity. But the issue is when you have a backlog from weeks of government shutdown, you have a lot of people who wanted to travel, who couldn't travel, who then have to rebook flights. And so you're talking about higher airfares, even though Thanksgiving's coming around, you've got even higher demand than usual. A lot more people are planning to travel. And so you've got these backlog issues where the flights are probably going to be fuller, and the fares are going to be a little bit higher than they traditionally have been, I think.
Yeah. We saw those TSA employees, right? Get those big $10,000 checks. Did all of those guys get those checks?
Well, pretty much everybody, if they were a federal employee, should have received their back pay by now.
Okay.
So what happened is, by law, they are required to be paid their back pay as employees, as federal employees. Federal contractors can be a little bit different,
Right.
but every agency has been ordered to pay as soon as possible. And so, depending on which agency it is, some may take a little bit longer than others, but
Right.
everybody should have been really paid by now.
What advice would you give to today's traveler during the busy holiday season? Can and will things get back to normal? Do you see this happening at all, if any? How soon?
Well, the best advice I can give travelers is plan for a little bit of flexibility and potentially delays or having to rebook a flight. I mean, maybe more so this year than in prior years because the holiday season is always challenging when it comes to travel. A lot of people want to be with their loved ones, and I completely understand that. But there's also an aspect of a lot of demand with a limited number of flights. And so sometimes that can put a damper on things if a flight is delayed or canceled. So just kind of embracing that a little bit, as hard as that is,
Yeah,
that unfortunately this year it's more of a part of reality than in prior years that you may have more delays and cancellations.
sure. What are the biggest staffing challenges currently facing the airline industry right now?
Well, a big part of it is airline or air traffic controllers because there's already been a shortage of air traffic controllers.
Yeah,
So now, when you have something like a government shutdown, you've got a situation where you've got people who aren't working and then who didn't get, or people who are working but aren't getting paid, and they have to continue getting paid
right.
or continue working without being paid. And so you've got a challenge where that's going to be very difficult for the average everyday person, including air traffic controllers, because you got to remember that most families and most people live mostly paycheck to paycheck. And it becomes extremely challenging to go 1 or 2 weeks, let alone for over a month without pay. And so the challenge I think we're going to be looking at is there's already a shortage of about 3,000 air traffic controllers nationwide. And what happens in a government shutdown is now you've got a morale issue, meaning air traffic controllers who may be working but may be on the fence about whether they want to continue in the job because it is challenging, it is stressful. But then on top of that, to not get paid for well over a month, that can put a big damper on morale and make people want to quit. As well as you've got to remember that when the government shuts down, when it comes to schooling and certification for additional air traffic controllers, that is also going to be delayed. So you're looking at a compound and domino effect of various factors where the reality is, I think that air traffic controllers are going to be harder and harder to find. So that labor shortage will actually increase rather than decrease.
We kind of take that for granted, right? You just hop on a plane, you just land, you take off and you land. But that job is so tedious and so hard, so difficult. Paint the picture for the listeners out there. Like they're pretty much going like this, right? They're controlling every plane, like the dynamics. How difficult is that job?
It's extremely difficult from a perspective of when you think about how much is at stake for getting something wrong. They've got to be alert during the whole time. There is no aspect of leaning back in your chair and scrolling through Instagram or just taking a break. The reality is that this is
Yeah,
life and death, and there's no margin for error. You have to be on top of your game. You've got to be paying attention, and you've got to communicate clearly and promptly. Because
yeah.
if you don't, there can be catastrophic loss. And so there's an aspect of that. And then on top of that, they tend to be, I think, a little bit underappreciated because they're behind the scenes. And
No one sees them.
so and they're in their own little area, so they don't really get to hear the thanks of the passengers whose lives they're saving essentially every day or protecting every day. And then on top of that, to spend weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks not getting paid for this tireless service, I think would put a damper on anybody's spirit.
For sure. How has the pandemic reshaped staffing levels and labor demands in aviation?
Well, you've got to remember that COVID, that the airline industry hadn't completely recovered from COVID. So from a perspective of its its services, it was still having challenges from COVID cancellations and a long time where people weren't traveling. Now, yes, after COVID in a way ended, I mean, we know that COVID hasn't ended and it never will. It's still around, but when everything started to open back up and people could travel again, there was a surge in demand for travel. But you've also got to remember that the airline industry generally is a very low profit margin industry. It's about 3 to 4% of net margin. So it is very difficult to make a profit in the airline industry overall, even when things are working perfectly. So then when you got challenges like COVID hitting and people being concerned about potentially flying, as well as issues such as government shutdown, where airline traffic controllers aren't getting paid and flights have to be canceled because of just issues relating to the overall number of flights being able to take off and land safely.
Right.
There are major challenges in an already challenged sector. So it makes it very difficult for them to continue to hire and grow for additional labor because, again, it becomes very choppy. And you really only want to hire labor when you need labor, when you need people to work, and labor isn't cheap. And so,
Right.
from a perspective of staffing for airline, in the overall airline industry, you want more stability, you want predictable growth. And for the last few years, at least, that has been extremely challenging in the airline industry. So I think they're going to continue to have labor issues.
Yeah. What can they do though? Maybe up the pay or make it more enticing. There seems to be a struggle across the border, right? Not just airline, but across the entire industry right now.
Well, that's right. And I think a big part of it is, maybe they could up the pay, but how much are you going to realistically up the pay when you're talking about net profit margins of 3 or 4%? There isn't a whole lot of margin there to be able to increase the pay without dramatically decreasing the margins. And so the airline industry, I think if I were them, I'd really look at maybe some additional perks, additional flying, maybe some additional partnerships with various airlines so that maybe additional members of staff, families can fly free, some additional perks or deals with hotels so that it's not literally money out of pocket
Right.
for them. But meaning if an airline, usually what happens with airline employees is they tend to get to fly for free, but
Right.
that usually does not extend to family, especially extended family and that kind of thing. So an additional benefit or perk may be that a certain number of extended family even can fly for free or a significantly reduced fare a number of times a year. So there may be additional ancillary benefits where those can be provided, especially when the flight isn't full, so that somebody's waiting on standby and that
Right.
flight seat was going to be empty anyways. And maybe it's a nice way to add some perks to get people to want to come in the working in the industry.
Yeah, no more buddy passes, right? Those buddy passes, you get those buddy passes, you're stuck there for like 2 hours on standby, like waiting for a seat. And you're like, it's supposed to be a thing, right? Like, 'cause I've been on those before. I'm like, I don't know if we're gonna get on this flight. It's like a give or take, right? So get rid of the buddy passes. Get me some guaranteed something so I can get on that flight. It's pretty good perk.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. Yeah. Make it a little bit more convenient. I mean, I think that's been a challenge across the board.
right.
I mean, I think everybody who's flown at some point has dealt with whether it's somebody on the phone with an extended wait. You finally get to somebody and they're not particularly nice or friendly,
Right.
or somebody at the counter. Your flight has just been canceled, and you're struggling. You're stressed,
Yeah.
and they aren't necessarily the warmest or most understanding when it comes to your concerns. So I think
Yeah.
there's all kinds of challenges from a customer service perspective in the airline industry. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that every airline is like that, or even most airlines are like that, or that most customer service representatives are like that. I am not saying that. I'm just saying that from a perspective of traveling and this industry, it tends to be a lot more high stress. For example, like flying is a lot more high stress than visiting Disneyland, generally speaking,
Yeah.
like once you're already in the park.
Right.
And so I think that you're already dealing with people who are more stressed. And so I think there has to be more of an understanding around that, and maybe some additional training around that to help with customer service, because I think that tends to be, at least according to consumer surveys, tends to be lacking in many airlines and the airline industry in general.
Sure. What roles within the air travel are most affected by staffing shortages? Pilots, flight attendants, ground crew, or air traffic controllers? What's most affected, do you think?
What is most affected by labor shortages, you're saying?
Yeah. Or staffing shortages. Yeah.
Okay, so well, it depends in the situation. I mean, right now, for example, I know that airline pilots tend to have a lot of challenges from a perspective of just their overall lifestyle. The golden age of travel is kind of over,
Yeah.
and so back in the day, where pilots were really kind of revered and were making a lot of money, had a good lifestyle. My understanding is now these days you'll have a lot of pilots who will actually stay together and room together, even in a single hotel room. Or if they're waiting on flights where they're on standby and they're not sure if they're going to be able to work, a lot of times they'll room together to be able to save on funds. So you're looking at challenges across the board, whether it's from pilots, and I think pilots in particular, because uh, it's such an involved position. It requires a high amount of training. That tends to be something that continues to be a challenge for airlines, where they're competing for a limited number of pilots. You have less people going to pilot school because the prospects just aren't there that they used to be. And so it's not as lucrative or as enticing of a career path as it used to be in decades past. And so I think that that's something you're going to continue to see challenges in.
Yeah. He's Pragamin. He's a business expert and attorney who deals in business and labor issues, large and small. How do staffing shortages among ground crews impact flight turnaround times and baggage handling? Do these guys even care about your baggage? You see some video on YouTube, right? They just throw bags, they do this stuff. It's just like, do they really care about your baggage, your luggage?
Well, maybe. I mean, look, I think baggage handling is a difficult job. Now, I'm not saying that it's acceptable for baggage
Right,
handlers to be mishandling bags or throwing bags around or treating somebody else's property with disrespect.
right.
From a perspective of moving those bags and moving them efficiently, it is a laborious job. It is difficult. Those bags are heavy. So there's aspects of getting those bags in and out of planes, and they have to be able to do it pretty quickly and efficiently. And unfortunately, sometimes what can happen is it becomes an airline culture type issue, or a staffing culture type issue, where somebody does something like that. They throw a bag and somebody else sees it, another employee sees it, and the employee throwing the bag doesn't get into trouble, doesn't get written up, and so suddenly now it seems like it's almost normal. But you've also got to remember that those videos that we see that go viral for one air baggage handler throwing a bag around or disrespecting a bag, there are thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of bags being moved without that happening to them. So again, I'm not excusing that those few times that a baggage handler does that, but I don't think that's the norm. I think, unfortunately, the reality is that it's just a sheer quantity of bags being moved around that it does require the bags to be moved quickly. And sometimes what happens, unfortunately, is those bags do get damaged from just the sheer volume of how quickly they need to be moved and how many other bags they're being moved with, so that you have other bags being stacked on top of a particular bag. So it may have a lot more weight on it than you might expect. And so that sometimes can deform the bag or damage the contents of the bag.
Are airports investing in automation to reduce staffing strain? What do you think?
Well, absolutely. You're seeing more and more AI investments in various kinds of infrastructure. So some of these more manual tasks and labor aspects of a job, you're going to continue to see the airline industry and industries overall continue to invest in things that can be automated or put into AI. And to the extent that they can automate somehow baggage handling, or to the maximum extent that they can, you can expect airlines to do that. Because something else you got to remember is that if you have a worker who gets injured while handling a bag, they've got a workers' compensation claim. And the airlines have to pay for their workers' compensation insurance for that. And of course, the more claims there are, the more injuries there are, the higher those premiums get. And eventually there is a trickle down aspect of that where higher insurance premiums will trickle down to airline ticket prices. So the more the airlines can do to invest in infrastructure such as robots or other things that don't have workers' compensation claims, I think the more you're going to see that, the more savings that airline industries can get from automation, the more they're going to do that. Even if it's a short-term expense, from a long-term perspective, if there's a payoff, you can fully believe that is something that they're going to look into and implement.
Are you a fan of AI, by the way? You embrace it? Is AI here to stay, you think?
AI is absolutely here to stay. AI will continue to grow. It's
Right.
like when computers came around. I mean,
Yeah.
there were some questions of whether emails were really going to become a norm, because it seems
Right.
like it's weird to send a piece of mail over the internet. Why wouldn't I just handwrite it and
Yeah.
send it? And it's interesting, if you take a look and if you just Google introduction of email reactions, you
Right.
can see some newscasts from back in the day that talk about it, and some of those highly unusual reactions. And when you reflect back on it today,
Yeah.
where you see that email is a daily part of life, for better or
Oh, for
worse,
sure.
maybe for the worse, because I don't think that really anybody looks forward to getting a whole bunch of emails. But from a perspective of, if you look at where it was then to where it is now, I think that you're going to see more and more of that with AI, meaning it's going to become much more of a daily aspect. It's going to get integrated into a number of things, just like computers have gotten integrated into so many things since they were introduced.
What are safety concerns arise when ground staff are overworked or stretched thin? We all have those days, right? We work sometimes 10 hours turns into 15 or 18. Overtime is great, but still tired.
That's right. And so, unfortunately, in these kinds of industries, depending on which position you're in, for example, we talked about air traffic controllers. Obviously, there really is no room for relaxing on that job and in that position. When you've got somebody like a baggage handler, for example, who's fatigued and has to move all of these bags, the reality is there's a much higher chance of injury. I think we have all at some point been in a position where we were fatigued and maybe went to go work out or go do something, maybe
Right.
just lift something. And we tweaked something or pulled something just because we weren't physically really ready to be able to do all of that. And our body had to try to move or do whatever it is we were trying to do. And unfortunately, it kind of shifts some of the weight and the load onto various parts of the body that really aren't intended to carry that kind of load, and it results in more injuries, which then unfortunately leads to more recovery time and additional labor shortages because you've got somebody who's now out with an injury, whereas they were previously working. So fatigue is a major issue, I think, across the board, regardless of what position somebody is in and regardless of what industry somebody is in.
Yeah. How do staffing problems differ between major airlines and regional carriers?
Sorry, I cut out.
Staffing problems differ between
How
major
do staffing
airlines,
problems differ?
yeah, and regional
So
carriers.
look, so regional carriers, you got to remember that they have a smaller number of employees, so they've also got a smaller number of alternates they can call in if somebody is out. So that's a challenge for a regional carrier. Now, when it comes to a major carrier, the flip side of that is you've got a lot of people who are involved in a lot of routes, and so yes, you can have more backups potentially for as an overall pool, but the reality is you're going to need a lot more staffing. There's a lot more logistical issues for these longer haul flights that the major carriers need to deal with because they're flying a lot more routes than those regional carriers. And so there's a lot more potential impact, particularly when it comes to other issues such as labor shortages with air traffic controllers and other areas. So it can become very, very problematic from a logistical standpoint if there's a domino effect for a larger carrier.
Yeah. Are international airlines facing similar challenges though, or is it mainly just a U.S. issue?
Well, from a perspective of the airline industry overall, it is the kind of the golden heyday of air travel
Yeah.
isn't really there for any of the whether it's internationally or here in the United States. So from a perspective of some of the challenges that are being faced here in the United States with labor shortages, maybe employee morale in the airline industry not being that great, you're seeing that throughout the world. You're seeing that throughout various kinds of carriers because the reality is people want more things for less, and with the advent of the internet and the ability to search for the cheapest flights possible, you're also continuing to see airline margins erode because previously if you wanted to book a flight before the internet, you might call a travel agent, you might call the airline directly and they'll quote you a price,
Right.
and you might call one or two airlines to get quotes. You're realistically not going to get quotes from 30 airlines manually, but
Right.
you can do that with the internet. And so you've got a lot more flexibility. You've also got these websites that let you choose which kind of airline. You can do these kind of hopper fares where
Yeah.
you take one airline for one leg and then another airline and another ticket for another leg. So you've got all these additional little quirks and tricks that you can use to really maximize your savings, which then in turn also minimizes the overall profit margin for airlines.
Yeah. What lessons has the industry learned from past disruptions in staffing? Is this a thing like we can look back and say we got to do this better, we got to do that better, that can't happen again? Have they learned their lesson?
Well, they what do they say? They say history repeats itself, or some
Yeah.
people say history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. I mean, the reality is, I think that you're continuing to see pretty much the same problems year after year,
Yeah.
decade after decade when it comes to airline travel, whether it comes to airline delays, cancellations, some of these issues with customer service. So I think there's a good argument to be made there that things aren't really that different, that this is essentially par
What
for
it is.
course, and this is more or less how it's been and seems like it will continue to be.
Yeah. Before I let you go, when was the last time you traveled and experienced a delay, and how did you handle that situation?
Let's see. A delay.
Yeah.
I think that the longest delay I had was this was the worst set of delays I have ever had. I was flying out of a regional airport and I was
Okay.
supposed to be flying to an international airport, but it was for a domestic cross country flight.
Okay.
And so what happened is it was cold. I was flying from Maryland to Philadelphia and Philadelphia to Los Angeles, and the flights from my local regional airport to Philadelphia kept getting canceled, kept getting canceled, kept getting canceled. But the flights from Philadelphia to California kept taking off. So I literally sat in an airport a whole day, delay after delay after delay for like 12 hours, doing
Wow.
not very much. And at a certain point, the last flight had flown out. And so I went home and came back the next day and sat there for about 4 hours. Got there around like 6 a.m., which was when the first flight was leaving, and missed about two more flights. And then ultimately, I just got a ride up to Philadelphia and then ended up just taking my connecting flight to California. So, from a perspective of what I did, I think maybe what I would do, I wasn't prepared for that. And
Yeah.
but what I would do is if I could go back in time and tell my younger self and give him some advice,
Yeah.
I would say, look, pack some books, maybe a Kindle or some e-reader so you can get new books. Be prepared that, look, things don't always move smoothly. Take a charger, take a battery pack, so that you can charge up your electronics, and at least either in a laptop maybe, so you can at least get some work done or get some reading done, get something productive done while you're waiting and waiting for things to smooth themselves out.
No refund? You never got a refund from that headache situation?
The irony is they offered me, I think, a grand sum of like $100 to be used on the future flight, which I never ended up using because I just
Yeah.
stopped flying that airline. So
You see so many accidents in the sky, right, as of late. Is this the worst time in the history of flying? Can our confidence be restored as consumers? What say you?
well, I mean, from a statistics standpoint, I'd have to take a look at the numbers to see if it is in fact some of to see if it is in fact less dangerous than it has been traditionally or previously. I know that we do tend to see the thing about airline travel in general and air travel in general is a lot of people tend to have phobias around it because it's kind of the effect of media overall. If there's a car accident, usually you don't hear about that on the news. There are so many more car accidents than there are airplane accidents. And statistically, you were far safer in an airplane than you are in a car. But I think that's very difficult, despite the overwhelming statistics that support
Right.
that. It's very difficult, I think, to mentally accept that because there's an aspect of if I'm in an airplane, I am not in control and I'm not the one driving. And I think pretty much all of us feel safer when we are in control instead of it being in somebody else's hands. And so there's an aspect, I think, of just a mental bias that goes into play there in terms of how safe you are. So, in terms of whether it's safer now or it's been safer traditionally, I will tell you that I think that there was a period of time, particularly in the 90s, where there were a number of airline accidents, planes would get lost, plane crashes. So that number has come down pretty dramatically. Year over year, I'd have to see the statistics to really kind of give a more accurate answer on this. But I think overall, when you compare the decades, you were certainly safer in airlines than you were in prior decades.
What's your go-to airline, by the way? You have a specific airline you have to fly every single time, or you switch it up every now and then?
I'm pretty flexible. There are some that I don't like, and so I have a bias against them based on prior experiences. And look, I
Right.
get it. Sometimes there's a one-off thing, but like the airline that I just told you about that
Yeah.
I was flying out from Maryland to Philadelphia to California, I
Right.
don't fly that airline. And just because of the way they handle the whole thing, and
Right.
so. But there's other aspects where I'm pretty agnostic as long as it's a good airline and it's reputable. I'm okay flying it. I don't have to fly the same airline all the time. I mean, it's nice, the certain comforts of certain airlines, and I have certain choices. But if that one's not available or it's dramatically higher in price than some other one,
Yeah.
I'm okay being flexible.
Yeah. There you go. Holidays are here, right? Which do you prefer? Thanksgiving, Christmas? Why?
Well, I'm a little biased towards Christmas because Christmas
Okay.
is also my birthday.
Oh,
But
awesome.
I will say I also love the time leading up to the holidays. I know that people tend to complain about the way the stores are and how they're so packed and how everything's so difficult and there's all this traffic, but I get so excited by that.
Yeah.
I mean, the reality is I just love the Christmas spirit. Everybody gets so excited.
Yeah.
And it really kind of just feels like a nice time to be able to kind of relax with family. Everybody, I think, tends to be in a more joyous mood
Yeah.
for Christmas than they tend to be in Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving, for whatever reason, tends to be a little bit higher stress of a holiday, in my opinion. People are like worried about the turkey and what
Yeah.
sides are going to be prepared, and it's tends to be a little bit shorter of a holiday too. I mean, you got Thanksgiving and Black Friday, and that's it.
That's it.
Whereas
Yeah.
like with Christmas, I think you tend to spend a little bit more time, and it is a little bit more relaxed from like starting from even like December 23rd or 24th, a lot of times through New Year's. So I like that togetherness. I think that, and I really do love the Christmas spirit and the joy of Christmas.
That's awesome, man. Hey, for anyone listening to today's show, how can they get in touch with you at all, if any? You want to plug anything in there for the listeners today?
Sure, yeah. I mean, so I have a website, www.paraglAmin.com. So that's www.paraglAmin.com. And you can check out what I'm doing. I've got a podcast where I talk to business owners about various kinds of issues they've overcome, talk to all kinds of entrepreneurs, as well as I've got a book coming out that is really made for business owners and entrepreneurs to help them successfully avoid a lot of the legal pitfalls that can destroy a business. So again, the website is www.paraglAmin.com.
Awesome, man. Hey, it's been a pleasure having you on today's show. Happy holidays to you. Happy Thanksgiving, Merry Christmas, and happy birthday, man.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. It's been a
Awesome.
privilege and a pleasure. And happy holidays to you. Happy Thanksgiving, Merry Christmas. And I hope you have a great one. And on your travel home to Atlanta, I wish you all the best. And I hope you get there safely and on time.
Appreciate it. He's Prague. I'm Kenford. We are out. Thanks for listening.